Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for coming together to immerse ourselves in this wonderful, rich body of wisdom we call Torah, and to which we contribute through our own imagination, creativity, and sense of curiosity about the text and one another. We are this week in Parshat Beshalach, which is in the book of Exodus. It begins with chapter 13, verse 17. We will read through the English translation, and then I'll share with you a focus study about it, and then we'll have our collaborative conversation about it. If you want to go ahead and unmute at this time, we have the opportunity to give a blessing, giving thanks for the opportunity this moment presents. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Thank you, God, for the opportunity to immerse ourselves in words, deeds, and relationships of Torah. Once again, we're in Parshat Beshalach, book of Exodus, chapter 13, beginning with verse 17. I'll share with you the opening verses, and then I'll invite others to have an opportunity to read as well. Now, when Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by the way of the Philistines, although it was nearer. For God said, "The people may have a change of heart when they see war and return to Egypt." So God led the people round about by the way of the wilderness at the Sea of Reeds. Now the Israelites went up armed out of the land of Egypt, and Moses took with him the bones of Joseph, who had exacted an oath from the children of Israel, saying, "God will be sure to take notice of you. Then you shall carry up my bones from here with you." They set out from Sukkot and encamped at Etham at the edge of the wilderness. God went before them in a pillar of cloud by day to guide them along the way, and in a pillar of fire by night to give them light that they might travel day and night. The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire by night did not depart before the people. Richard, would you like to read the start of chapter 14?
Thank you, Rabbi. The Lord said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites to turn back and encamp before Pharaoh, between Migdol and the sea, before Baal-zephon. You shall encamp facing it by the sea. Pharaoh will say of the Israelites, 'They are astray in the land. The wilderness has closed in on them.' Then I will stiffen Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them, that I may assert my authority against Pharaoh and all his host. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord." And they did. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, Pharaoh and his courtiers had a change of heart about the people and said, "What is this we have done, releasing Israel from our service?" He ordered the chariots and took his men with him. He took 600 of his picked chariots and the rest of the chariots of Egypt, with officers in all of them. The Lord stiffened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he gave chase to the Israelites. As the Israelites were departing boldly, the Egyptians gave chase to them, and all the chariots, horses of Pharaoh, his horsemen, and his warriors overtook them, encamped by the sea near Pi-Hahiroth before Baal-zephon.
Thank you. And Sherry and Steve, if you have to continue around verse 10.
Thank you, Rabbi. As Pharaoh drew near, the Israelites caught sight of the Egyptians advancing upon them. Greatly frightened, the Israelites cried out to the Lord, and they said to Moses, "Was it for want of graves in Egypt that you brought us to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us, taking us out of Egypt? Is this not the very thing we told you in Egypt, saying, 'Let us be, and we will serve the Egyptians'? For it is better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness." But Moses said to the people, "Have no fear, stand by, and witness the deliverance which the Lord will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you will never see again. I'll do 14, Steve.
The Lord will battle for you. You hold your peace. Then the Lord said to Moses, why do you cry out to me? Tell the Israelites to go forward, and you lift up your rod and hold out your arm over the sea and split it, so that the Israelites may march into the sea on dry ground. And I will stiffen the hearts of the Egyptians, so that they go in after them. And I will gain glory through Pharaoh and all the warriors, his chariots and his horsemen. Let the Egyptians know that I am the Lord when I gain glory through Pharaoh, his chariots and his horsemen.
Thank you both so much. Let me invite David and Susan, if you'd like to read a little bit, starting at verse 19.
Thank you, Rabbi.
And the angel of God, who was going in front of the camp of Israel, moved and went behind them. And the column of cloud went from them in front of them and stood behind them. And it came between the camp of Egypt and the camp of Israel. And there was the cloud and darkness for the Egyptians, while the column of fire lit the night for the Israelites, and one did not come near the other all night.
And Moses reached his hand out over the sea, and Hashem drove back the sea with a strong east wind all night and turned the sea into dry ground, and the sea was split. And the children of Israel came through the sea on the dry ground, and the water was a wall to them to the right and to their left. And Egypt pursued and came after them, every horse of Pharaoh, his chariots, his horsemen, through the sea. And it was in the morning watch, and Hashem gazed at Egypt's camp through a column of fire and cloud, and threw Egypt's camp into tumult. And he turned its chariot's wheel so that it drove it with heaviness. And Egypt said, let me flee from Israel, because Hashem is fighting for them against Egypt.
Thank you both so much. I'm going to invite Mark Levinstein, if you'd like to continue there at verse 26.
Thank you, Rabbi. Then the Lord said to Moses, hold out your arm over the sea, that the waters may come back upon the Egyptians and upon their chariots and upon their horsemen. Moses held out his arm over the sea, and at daybreak the sea returned to its normal state, and the Egyptians fled at its approach. The Lord hurled the Egyptians into the sea. The waters turned back and covered the chariots and the horsemen, Pharaoh's entire army that followed them into the sea. Not one of them remained. But the Israelites had marched through the sea on dry ground, the waters forming a wall for them on the right and on their left. Thus the Lord delivered Israel that day from the Egyptians. Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the shore of the sea. And when Israel saw the wondrous power which the Lord had wielded against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord. They had faith in the Lord and his servant Moses.
Thank you, Mark. Dave, would you like to read some of chapter 15?
Then Moses and the Israelites sang this song to God. They said, I will sing unto God, for he has triumphed gloriously. Horse and driver he has hurled into the sea. God is my strength and might. He is become my deliverance. This is my God. I will enshrine him, the God of my father's house, and I will exalt him. God the warrior, God is his name. Pharaoh's chariots and his army he has cast into the sea, and the pick of his officers are drowned in the sea of reeds. The deeps covered them. They went down into the depth like a stone. Your right hand, God, glorious in power. Your right hand, God, shatters the foe. In your great triumph, you break your opponents. You send forth your fury, it consumes them like straw. At the blast of your nostrils, the waters piled up. The floods stood straight like a wall. The deeps froze in the heart of the sea. The foe said, I will pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the spoil. My desire shall have its fill of them. I will bear my sword. My hand shall subdue them.
Thank you so much, Dave. I'm going to invite Jim, if you'd like to continue there at verse 10.
Thank you, Rabbi. You made your wind blow, the sea covered over them. They sank like lead in the majestic waters. Who is like you, O Lord, among the celestials? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in splendor, working wonders? You put your right hand, the earth swallowed them. In your love, you led the people you redeemed. In your strength, you guide them to your holy abode. The peoples here, they tremble. Agony grips the dwellers in Philistia. Now are the clans of Edom dismayed, the tribes of Moab, trembling grips them. All the dwellers in Canaan are aghast. Terror and dread descend upon them. Through the might of your arm, they are still as stone. Till your people cross over, O Lord, till your people cross whom you have ransomed. You will bring them and plant them in your own mountain, the place you made to dwell in, O Lord, the sanctuary, O Lord, which your hands established. The Lord will reign forever and ever.
Thank you so much. Let me invite Norm. Would you like to continue there at verse 19?
But the horses of Pharaoh with his chariots and riders went into the sea, and Adonai turned back on them the waters of the sea. But the Israelites marched on dry ground in the midst of the sea. And Miriam, the prophet, Aaron's sister, picked up the hand drum, and all the women went out after her and danced with hand drums. And Miriam chanted for them, Sing to Adonai, for he has triumphed gloriously. Horse and rider he has hurled into the sea. Then Moses caused Israel to set out from the Sea of Reeds. They went on to the wilderness of Shur. They traveled 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. They came to Marah, but they could not drink the water of Marah because it was bitter, and that is why it was called Marah. The people grumbled against Moses, saying, What have we to drink? So he cried out to Adonai, and Adonai showed him a piece of wood. He threw it into the water, and the water became sweet. There God made for them a fixed rule. There they were to put to the test. God said to them, If you will heed your God Adonai diligently, doing what is upright in God's sight, giving ears to God's commandment, and keeping all God's laws, then I will not bring upon you any of the diseases that I brought upon the Egyptians, for I, Adonai, am your healer. And they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees, and they encamped there beside the water.
Thank you so much. Justin and Linda, would you like to read a little bit, starting with the beginning of chapter 16?
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Would you like to go?
Sure, darling.
Okay.
They journeyed from Elim, and the entire community of the children of Israel came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the 2nd month after their departure from the land of Egypt. The entire community of the children of Israel complained against Moses and against Aaron in the desert. The children of Israel said to them, If only we died by the hands of the Lord in the lands of Egypt, when we sat by pots of meat, when we ate bread to our fill. But you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire congregation to death. So the Lord said to Moses, Behold, I'm going to rain down for you bread from heaven, for the people shall go out and gather what is needed for the day. Ask them whether or not they will follow my teaching. And it shall be on the 6th day that when they prepare what they will bring, it will be double of what they gather every day. And thereupon Moses and Aaron said to all the children of Israel in the evening, you shall know that the Lord brought you out of the land of Egypt.
And in the morning, you shall see the glory of the Lord when he hears your complaints against the Lord. But of what significance are we that you make the people complain against us? And Moses said, when the Lord gives you in the evening meat to eat and bread in the morning with which to become sated, when the Lord hears your complaints, which you are making, the people complain against him, but of what significance are we? Not against us are your complaints, but against the Lord. And Moses said to Aaron, say to the entire community of the children of Israel, draw near before the Lord, for he has heard your complaints. And it came to pass that when Aaron spoke to the entire community of the children of Israel, that they turned toward the desert, and behold, the glory of the Lord appeared in a cloud.
Wow, thank you both so much. And let me invite Robert, would you like to continue there at verse 11?
Yes, thank you so much. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, I have heard the murmurings of the children of Israel. Speak unto them, saying, at even ye shall eat flesh, and in the morning ye shall be filled with bread, and ye shall know that I am the Lord your God. And it came to pass that at even the quails came up and covered the camp, and in the morning the dew lay round about the host. And when the dew was gone, when the dew that lay was gone up, behold, upon the face of the wilderness there lay a small round thing, as small as the hoar frost on the ground. And when the children of Israel saw it, they said one to another, it is manna, for they wist not what it was. And Moses said unto them, this is the bread which the Lord hath given you to eat. This is the thing which the Lord hath commanded. Gather of it every man according to his eating, an omer for every man, according to the number of your persons. Take ye every man for them which are in the tents. And the children of Israel did so, and gathered, some more, some less. And when they did meet it with one another, he that gathered much had nothing over, and he that gathered little had no lack. They gathered every man according to his eating. And Moses said, let no man leave of it till the morning. Notwithstanding, they hearkened not unto Moses, but some of them left of it until the morning, and it bred worms and stank, and Moses was wroth with them. And they gathered it every morning, every man according to his eating. And when the sun waxed hot, it melted. And it came to pass that on the 6th day they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for one man, and all the rulers of the congregation came and told Moses. And he said unto them, this is that which the Lord hath said. Tomorrow is the rest of the holy Sabbath unto the Lord. Bake that which ye will bake today, and seeth that ye shall, and see that ye will seeth, and that which remaineth over lay up for you to be kept until the morning. And they laid it up till the morning, as Moses bade, and it did not stink, neither was there any worms therein. And Moses said, eat that today, for today is a Sabbath unto the Lord. Today ye shall not find it in the field. 6 days ye shall gather it, but on the seventh day, which is the Sabbath, in it there shall be none.
Thank you, Robert, so much. Amy, do you want to read a little bit? We're at verse 27.
Yet some of the people went out on the seventh day to gather, but they found nothing. And the Lord said to Moses, "How long will you men refuse to obey my commandments and my teachings? Mark that the Lord has given you the Sabbath. Therefore, he gives you 2 days' food on the 6th day. Let everyone remain where he is. Let no man or person leave his place on the 7th day." So the people remained inactive on the 7th day. The house of Israel named it manna. It was like coriander seed, white, and it tasted like wafers of honey. Moses said, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Let 1 omer of it be kept throughout the ages, in order that they may see the bread that I fed you in the wilderness when I brought you out from the land of Egypt." And Moses said to Aaron, "Take a jar, put 1 omer of manna in it, and place it before the Lord to be kept throughout the ages." As the Lord had commanded Moses, Aaron placed it before the pact to be kept. And the Israelites ate manna 40 years, until they came to a settled land. They ate the manna until they came to the border of the land of Canaan. The omer is the 10th of an ephah.
Yeah, Ephah. Thank you so much.
Thank
you,
you.
Amy. Now we're at chapter 17. From the wilderness of sin, the whole Israelite community continued by stages as God would command. They encamped at Rephidim, and there was no water for the people to drink. The people quarreled with Moses. "Give us water to drink," they said. And Moses replied to them, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you try God?" But the people thirsted there for water, and the people grumbled against Moses and said, "Why did you bring us up from Egypt? To kill us and our children with livestock, with thirst?" Moses cried out to God, saying, "What shall I do with this people? Before long they will be stoning me." Then God said to Moses, "Pass before the people, take with you some of the elders of Israel, and take along the rod with which you struck the Nile, and set out. I will be standing there before you on the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock, and water will issue from it, and the people will drink." And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. The place was named Massah and Meribah, because the Israelites quarreled, and because they tried God, saying, "Is the Lord present among us or not?" Amalek came and fought with Israel at Rephidim. Moses said to Joshua, "Pick some men for us and go out and do battle with Amalek. Tomorrow I will station myself on the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand." Joshua did as Moses told him and fought with Amalek, while Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. Then whenever Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed. But whenever he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands grew heavy, so they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it, while Aaron and Hur, one on each side, supported his hands. Thus his hands remained steady until the sun set, and Joshua overwhelmed the people of Amalek with the sword. Then God said to Moses, "Inscribe this in a document as a reminder, and read it aloud to Joshua. I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven." And Moses built an altar and named it Adonai Nissi. He said, "It means hand upon the throne of God. God will be at war with Amalek throughout the ages." That's our Torah portion for the week. Thank you so much, everyone, for contributing your voices to bring these words out, ears and thoughts. I'd like to share with you a focused study about it. If you have a copy of the study sheet, I invite you to take it out at this time. And when I started studying this week's portion, the first thing that attracted me, which as it often does, is the opening words of the Torah portion for some kind of hint or insight into what the whole body of the portion might be about. And the most significant first word in our Torah portion is Beshalach, which means when he let go. And in the context of the narrative, it's the he there is referring to Pharaoh. But at first I thought, well, why not play with this notion about letting go? And maybe there's more than this character, Pharaoh, who's letting go. Maybe there's some message here about letting go. So I played with that in my mind a little bit. And then I remembered that, of course, the climactic portion of this week's reading is about the crossing of the sea. And in fact, this Shabbat is called Shabbat Shirah, the Sabbath of the song, because of a song was sung upon the crossing of the sea. So I figured, let me take a deeper look at that moment of the crossing of the sea. And so that is what I settled upon as the focus for this study sheet that I'm sharing with you, which I've titled Crossing the Deep. So number one on the study sheet, we have that verse, which identifies what exactly the Israelites are crossing over. So God led the people round about by the way of the wilderness at the Sea of Reeds. And the Hebrew for by the way of the Sea of Reeds is Derech HaMidbar Yam Suf. So Yam means sea, and Suf is what is defining this particular barrier that seems to be in the way of the Israelites fully escaping from Egypt and crossing over onto the pathway that will lead towards the place of promise. So the word Suf is indeed defined in one of its noun meanings as reeds or rushes. Hence we get the name, the Sea of Reeds. Of course, the noun is built on a verb, as is the case with Hebrew etymology. And the verb root that the word suf, meaning reeds, is built upon is the Hebrew verb sof, which means to come to an end, to cease. Okay. And so another noun from that verbal root also means end or conclusion. And in the poetic writing Ecclesiastes, we have the phrase sof kol ha'adam, the end of every human, meaning death. So on the one hand, we have this naturalistic image here, the Sea of Reeds, but because of the root of that word and the way it is used in other contexts, it also means the end of something, the cessation of something. And in fact, it can mean death itself, the death of something. Well, we know that poetically, as well as in life itself, the ends of things also can represent the beginnings of other things. So I started playing with this notion about, well, maybe what the barrier that the Israelites are crossing over is not just a body of water physically, but maybe is being used symbolically as some kind of crossing that is necessary that will represent the end of an entire way of life and the beginning of a whole new way of life. So that's kind of what I want to explore just over the next few minutes. Of course, again, this is known as Shabbat Shirah, the Sabbath of song, because as Dave and others read, this is a song that is sung. But what's interesting to note is that there are actually, as we perhaps noticed during our reading tonight, there are two songs that are sung. One song is led by Moses, and according to tradition, it was Moses and the men who sang this first song. And then a second song that is sung led by Miriam and the women with their timbrels. Okay. And so here is a close reading of the word that is used for the verb to sing, that's used differently by those two song settings. So first, from chapter 15, verse 1, Moses and the children of Israel sang this song, Ashira, I will sing out to Adonai. Ashira is in the future tense of the verb to sing. And we'll talk about the significance of that in a moment. And then the second time, Miriam and the women with their timbrels, Miriam called out to all the women, Shiru to Adonai. And that's in the gessive, the hortatory, the imperative tense of the verb. Sing out, meaning sing out now. So we're going to take a look at a very interesting commentary by a Hasidic rabbi, Rabbi Kalanimus Kalman Epstein. So if you have the study sheet, turn it over, and we'll look at his commentary about all this and the significance of the fact that Moses and the men had the verb to sing in the future, whereas Miriam and the women had it in the imperative now, sing now. So this is what Rabbi Kalanimus Kalman Epstein wrote. All the worlds and all creatures may be categorized as masculine and feminine. Anything bounded has both upper and lower extremities. In the future, however, the lines and the circle will be equal, and there will no longer be the categories of masculine and feminine. All will come to realize God's light equally. This is just like a circle dance, where every part of the circumference is equidistant from the center. Now Moses said, I will sing unto Adonai. And this was because Moses spoke while still under the categories of masculine and feminine. But Miriam, through her circle dance, her hakafah, drew down the supernal light from the place where the categories of masculine, feminine do not exist. So here's this very radical reading by this Hasidic rabbi who's taking the difference in the verb tenses and saying there's one dimension, which is the dimension that most of us are kind of aware of, which is full of differentiation and distinctions and categories and boundaries and barriers and lines of power and authority. And that's what we're aware of. And he's projecting, though, that that's not the way it has to be. And in fact, that's not the way the divine wants this world to be. The divine wants this world to be one in which there aren't those differentiations, distinctions, lines of power and authority. And instead of being linear relationships separating people, there'll be more of a circular experience of the world where everyone will be gathered around and everyone will share equally in the beauty of the world around them. So this notion that Rabbi Epstein is sharing with us also highlights that this is not something that comes about because God wills it from the outside. Hidden within what he's saying is this becomes an initiative by human beings to make it so. And at least in that moment, Miriam and the women were making it so. They were making it clear that it is possible for the world to be a different place. So this notion about the world becoming a different place and how the world becomes a different place, not because of divine intervention, but because of human initiative, is very key within Jewish wisdom. So here we have from an early Midrash, this reference from Rabbi Samuel Bar Nachman. Rabbi Samuel Bar Nachman said, having created the world, the Blessed Holy One said, I long to have a dwelling place below, just as I have one on high. So this notion about the divine wanting to dwell in this dimension, again, is so key to understanding the Jewish approach to what life is all about, that this dimension is not a sullied, dirty, and inferior dimension, and that our goal should be to try and reach above this dimension and go somewhere else, say to a heaven. No, quite the opposite. The goal in Jewish tradition is to make this dimension divine. Okay. And the only ones that can do that are us, human beings. So this is a theme that Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, who was a disciple of great Hasidic Rabbi Dov Ber of Mezerich, who in turn was the successor of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidic Judaism. So Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi was one of the great constructs of a branch within Hasidic Judaism, which today is known as Chabad. And this is what Rabbi Shneur Zalman said. He was born about 1745. This is the purpose of a human being, that we transform the lower realms into an environment in which the goodness of God is at home and is the dominant reality. That's our job. That's our job, is to make this dimension a place where the divine dwells. Now there's a paradox there, because if we ourselves are imperfect, how are we supposed to create a perfect dimension? And in fact, that paradox is captured within Talmud itself. I've shared with you this phrase, a prisoner cannot release himself from prison. So how is this done? Well, this is where Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi goes on and says, well, the true meaning of a dwelling in the lower realms is that the lowly realms themselves change from within. So this becomes the driving force, I would suggest, within Hasidic Judaism in general, and certainly within the Lubavitcher Chabad movement that Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi is the founder of, which is that our task is to change ourselves so that we can become those who create a dwelling place for God in this world. Now, this confrontation with and transformation of self is, as we all know from our own lives, is very, very hard. And here's what one of the great writers in United States history, James Baldwin, wrote in an essay he wrote called The Creative Process. Anyone who has ever been compelled to think about it knows that the one face that one can never see is one's own face. I believe that if we understood ourselves better, we would damage ourselves less. But the barrier between oneself and one's knowledge of oneself is high indeed. There's so many things one would rather not know. So that I want to share with you our painting and our artist for this week. If you turn back over, this is a self-portrait by Vincent van Gogh. Rembrandt, we think, produced more self-portraits than any other artist that we know of. Rembrandt painted 40 paintings that were self-portraits, and he did that over the course of 40 years. Vincent van Gogh painted 36 self-portraits, but he did that over a period of just 10 years. And in part, Van Gogh did self-portraits out of economic necessity because he was too poor to afford to pay models, and so he painted himself. But I think there's a deeper reason why he engaged in self-portraits. It's because he was a spiritually driven person who was in search of the truth that lies beneath the surface. And he used himself as as an exemplar of the capacity to probe into oneself and then to present oneself in all of that honesty out to the world. So just a little bit of background about Van Gogh himself. Van Gogh was born in 1853, and at the age of 16, he apprenticed himself to a firm that was an international art dealer firm. And he did that for about 10 years until about 1879, when he was then about 26 years old. And he was let go, and he decided that he wanted to pursue life in the clergy. And his father himself was a preacher in the Lutheran church, and eventually Van Gogh himself is commissioned as a preacher and a missionary by the Belgian Missionary Society, and they send him to serve as a missionary to to miners working in Belgium, in a community in Belgium. And he throws himself so compassionately and so fervently into that cause that he ends up giving away his own lodgings to a homeless person. He ends up sleeping in a hut with the rest of the miners, sleeping on a bed of straw. And at the end of about a year, the church says, you know, you're taking this way too fervently, and your health has declined, and we're dismissing you. And so he's dismissed as a missionary. And he's so poor at that point, he returns home to live with his family, and he starts learning how to draw. And then eventually he's able to get his own place. And this is about 1881, and he's trying to promote his paintings. And in 1885, he sells his first masterpiece, he produces his first masterpiece, The Potato Eaters. And his palette at the time is very somber, very grim, very gray, very dark. And in 1886, he goes to Paris because that's where all these new innovations in art are happening. And he becomes attached to the Impressionist movement. And in particular, he meets up with Camille Pissarro, who helps him lighten his palette and introduces himself to the notion of complementary colors that gives more luminescence to his work. And then in 1888, when he is 35 years old, he moves down to Arles in southern France for the greater bright that he can experience there, and he's hoping to be able to create an alternative to Paris for an artist community there. The only one who joins him is Paul Gauguin, who lives in the same house with him for a couple of months until Gauguin can't stand his emotional outbursts and his irregular mental state, and he leaves after a couple months. And Van Gogh himself, in 1889, just a year after getting there, has a mental health crisis, and he commits himself to a psychiatric institution in the nearby community of Saint-Rémy, which is about 15 miles from Arles. And he's there for a year. And during that year, while he's in this psychiatric institution, he creates some of his most extraordinary work, including one that probably most of you are familiar with, Starry Night. And Starry Night is not one that he made while he's outside looking at the sky and the trees. It's something he did entirely from his own memory and imagination. And in that sense, when you look at Starry Night, you'll see things happening there that are beyond nature. Something else, there's another dimension that has become made manifest on that canvas there. Well, the same year that he did Starry Night, while he's in the psychiatric institution, he made this self-portrait that's on this page. And here it is. It's these colors, this absinthe, and these other greens, the aquas, are so dominant on the canvas. He has presented himself not so much in a peasant garb or in his painter's garb, but in a more formal suit and waistcoat, which is all in those greens. And then behind him, these swirl of greens that are like these energy auras flowing all around him, kind of reminiscent of the sky in Starry Night. And then in contrast to the greens is the red of his beard and the red of his hair. And then you look closely at his face, you see the reds and the greens and more colors just swirling and swarming and flowing across his face. So when we look at this, I think, well, what is happening here? Is this a man who's in pain? Is this a man who's despondent? Is this a man who says, I'm trapped within myself, I am a psychiatric patient who has had a mental crisis? And I thought, well, maybe this is what he started out as when he first became a preacher, first became committed to a path of spirituality and God, that he's a missionary. But in this case, he's not a missionary to someone else, he's a missionary to himself. That he's exploring his inner self, trying to get past all the lies and the layers of untruth, and he wants to bring all that truth to the surface, because he realizes that accomplishing that and bringing it and sharing it with others is kind of an aspect of divine manifestation, that it's revelatory. So here is what Vincent van Gogh said during the same time that he was painting this portrait. He wrote in a letter to his brother Theo, they say, and I am willing to believe it, that it is difficult to know yourself, but it isn't easy to paint yourself either. And that is what he's doing. He's trying to get to know himself, and then he's also wanting to display the self that he has gotten to know to others, because he understands that that's the only way in which we can create a just and decent society. To know yourself and to be able to share yourself honestly with others. Well, Vincent van Gogh dies a few months after having made this portrait. He dies in July of 1890 at the age of 37. One of the most extraordinary artists that has ever lived, and perhaps one of the most honest and spiritually driven artists that has ever lived. So I go back to our theme here, this crossing of the deep. I want to suggest is Torah's way of saying, you can't just physically leave one place where you've been entrapped and confined, walk out of it, and then walk into another place and think that you can create a community based upon mutual responsibility, accountability, and to have a sense of fulfillment and peace. You have to cross the deep. And I want to suggest Torah understands the deep as that which is within. And the rabbis in the Talmud will play with this notion about the deep. They will talk about the mountains above and the mountains below. And when they talk about the mountains below, they're talking about what we now describe as the subconscious, the inner self, and how important it is to explore that territory if we're going to create a world that is a dwelling place for the divine. So with that, I'd love to know what you experienced and what you thought in our journey together this evening, and perhaps as you read the portion earlier and thought about this painting. So go ahead, David and Susan, yeah.
So this is a personal comment.
Yeah.
I have a daughter. I have two daughters, but my older daughter is Miriam, and she's got a son that has some challenges, and they're talking about moving. Her and her husband and their two children, and they have good reasons to move. And yesterday, they'd been talking about it. They went and saw a house. And yesterday, her son threw a tantrum on his way to school. And she said, she suddenly went, Dylan, is this because of the move? And he said, yes. And I said, would you please tell Dylan that I love to move because it presents an opportunity to start over, to re-envision my living space and how I live in it, kind of like a clean slate, but not entirely. And it just struck me about the similarities somewhat in the Torah portion.
Susan, I'm touched and grateful that you're sharing something, very personal like that. And wonder if you could just reflect a little bit upon how that applies, this notion that you're sharing with us, which is very rich in wisdom, applies to people at different points, different stages in their growth and development.
So let's say, I guess it's partly looking at life as opportunities, not obstacles. And that as we go through life, we learn and that we can always you don't ever leave the past totally behind, but you don't have to carry the weight of it with you. You can build upon it.
That's beautiful. Do you know when you first started feeling or thinking that way? Yeah.
No. I think almost all my life.
Wow. Okay. I don't want to burden you with placing you in the position of sharing more than you want to share, but I was just curious, like how your daughter responded to your suggestion that would be something to share with your grandchild.
Well, it was in a text message and she gave me a thumbs up, and I don't know if she actually shared it or not.
Yeah.
But I bet you that she, in her own words, probably tried to share it with him.
Mm-hmm.
Because Dylan and I have a pretty good relationship, a special bond, and I think that it would matter to him that I would think that the move might be a good thing rather than a negative thing.
And I'm sure, knowing your family as I do, that merely to tell a child, it's a good thing to move, you have new experiences. That message is one thing, but the more important message probably, which often gets unstated in words anyway, is, and my child, I love you. I'm always going to be by you. I will take care of you. We will have these adventures together. And that will be reassuring for whatever dissettlement otherwise that there might be in the child's life. So God bless you. Thank you for sharing. David, did you want to share anything? That's right. Okay. Then let me call upon Mark Levenstein. Go ahead, Mark.
I'm kind of stuck on a prisoner cannot release himself from prison.
Yeah.
And, in a literal sense, that may well be true. You need a key, and otherwise you're really not released from it. You may escape from it, but not released from it. But for the prison that we can put ourselves in and how we think or how we behave or what we do, who else can release you from that?
Say that last part again.
Who else but yourself? Who but yourself can release you from that?
Okay.
And I'm wondering how our Talmudic scholars dealt with that, or if they, and how it was looked at.
Yeah.
Because even the Rabbi Zalman kind of goes that would change from within.
So I will share this with you, which is that the context within which that particular statement is made, there's also a story about a rabbi who was a great healer. And he went and he healed a student of his, okay, from whatever ailment that student had. And then that rabbi himself became sick and was visited by another rabbi and basically said to the first rabbi, well, you healed your student. Why don't you heal yourself? And that's where this notion, well, a prisoner cannot release himself from prison. And that's when the second rabbi reaches out his hand and is able to help the first rabbi to recover from whatever ailment he has. And so what you got me to thinking about is the number of recovery groups and self-help groups that I've sat in where people sit in a circle and there's no judgment that's being expressed. There's no authority that's being imposed on anyone. These are people who are all engaged in some form of trying to heal themselves, recover from whatever ailment that they've got, and they are all helping one another. And so it brings me back to that notion about Miriam and the circle, which is there's no authority figure that's going to step in and do this for you. We're going to share and cohere one another. So that's what you got me to think about.
I mean, that's the kind of direction I was going in, but I mean, it's adding a layer to a prisoner cannot release himself from prison. Yeah.
And I just want to acknowledge, Mark, your adult life has been spent as a caretaker and healer for others, and it's a very profound gift that you share with others.
Thank you. I guess as a way of background, this past week I started a class on Talmud.
On what?
A Talmud.
Yes.
With Rabbi Perlman. And the concept of once a decision is made, it can't be changed. In the Talmud, it can be elaborated and you can bring in other things to add to it, but you can't change that initial decision. I struggle with that. I'm struggling with that one.
So it's good to know that that's within the context of legal decisions that are being made, and not necessarily about one's character or well-being.
I understand that, but then it gets back to a kind of fundamentalist interpretation of the law, if you will.
Right.
And that's maybe a topic for a different.
It is a bigger topic, but I want to make sure I get in what I've always found as a thrilling notion, which is from Adin Steinsaltz, who was one of the great Talmudic scholars of the 20th century, who said, any decision that is made in halakha is but one of the correct decisions that was possible to be made. And it is just, the community is merely awaiting a time when there might be a good argument made for one of those other decisions to now prevail. Anyway, it's just
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm going to call a number of people here. Let me call upon Richard here because you had your hand up, and then I'll call upon some of the people who have got their hands up on the screen.
Two things written down. I have a lot of things, and I'll try to just say two of them. Know thyself, presume not God to span, the proper study of mankind is man. And I may be locked in prison, but the Lord has set my soul free. And this portion about the Sea of Reeds, you know, we had before, and Joseph is with them, and Joseph on their march is in the basket. His bones are being taken up. And remember that Jacob was going to tell us what happens at the end of days. Well, the end of days is the Sea of Reeds. That's the death. That's where we go from the material world and the polarization of the parties, or the polarization of male and female, toward what's appearing now in the world, which is non-binary. And we're seeing what happens in the two-party system, where there's no such thing as compromise. It's a blood sport. And it's going on exactly what was happening at the rock with Moses when he hits he loses faith and tries to make water come out, because they're trying to get male and female to have conversation. And the process of conversation is synthesizing their apparent differences, or the two gates of nurturance and limits, to try and apply those to the next generation. And that's what we're lacking now. And what we're seeing, just go to Google and measure and write government now and what's going on. And remember the train that was coming down the track toward the gate in the Monet painting. And here we are at the end of that game. And we're having many fights among the clan, which our judges, Haftorah portion talks about going on, when the judges came in and there's, whoa, north and south, and everybody's at everybody's throats. And that's kind of a stage we're in now. So what I'm saying is that when Rabbi talks about, well, be aware of your own growth. When you're green, you grow, you're ripe, you rot. And that growth continues from, they say at about 26 weeks, the neonate already has become sentient. And we're now becoming sentient, and like the person in jail with a Bible and water and a loaf of bread, has an opportunity to do the kind of soul searching or meditation or whatever you want to call it, to be open to whatever God is trying to get in, because he needs to use your fingers. She, her, we're being led by the Shekinah, needs to use these to do something in the world, so that when we get to the Sea of Reeds, we'll be ready to relax and go on with our journey at some other level. And I think that this is what this portion speaks to for me.
Fantastic. Oh, wow. Thank you so much, Richard. Very rich, very rich. I'm going to come back to some of those things in just a moment. I want to call upon other folks also that have got their hands up. Let me call upon Sherry, Steve, and then Robert, and then Norm. Go ahead, Sherry, Steve.
Well, I thank you, Rabbi. I made a note to the side, and I don't think I got the whole thing. The goal in Jewish tradition is to make a dwelling on earth, a dwelling for God. And I was thinking about that, and I came across an essay today as I was reading in the Times of Israel by the Shalom Hartman Institute. And at any rate, this was an interesting thing, because I was thinking about this very deeply, and about Gaza, and how that the concept of just expelling all of these people is just it is really troubling to me. And here's a quote from this institute: "The question is not what is possible, but what is worthy of Israel and the Jewish people." And I was just thinking about that in relation to creating a dwelling place on earth. And I was thinking, that this institute is really spot on. This is, to do such a thing is not worthy of the Jewish people. It's not worthy of Israel. And it certainly is not to channel the Torah portion, it is not creating a dwelling for God in Israel, in my opinion.
Wow. Thank you so much. You've taken this material here, you've taken material from Shalom Hartman, taken material from your own heart, and you're trying to apply it to some of the most difficult issues on the ground that certainly the people in the land of Israel are facing, as well as those of us who are outside the land of Israel. Thank you for your courage and your integrity in doing so. Thank you. Beautiful. Let me call upon Robert and then Norm. Thank you, Sherry.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Well, thank you again for a lovely evening. I really appreciate that you started out the visit with deep, because, you know, when you say that word, I see oceans and seas. And I think one of the things we've lost in a materialistic Western culture is the ability to relate to nature. And, you know, I really appreciated the very first comment about starting over. And so for me, I'm very visual, and I immediately go to two sources, Baha'i revelation and/or nature. For me, these are the two great textbooks. And then what is the confirmation? Well, I'm going to use the words of Christ, by their fruits ye shall know them. And that's true for anything. If it's a good class, you know by how the students did, et cetera, et cetera. And in a materialistic society, when we start over, we typically think, and I'm not referring, by the way, to the daughter here, I'm just talking about in general, and I was thinking of Van Gogh as well. We think of moving or buying or rearranging. I keep going to nature and I think of the flower. How does the flower start anew? It's sleeping. It's filled with itself. It wants to start anew and not be filled with itself. The sun rises in the morn and it turns to it. And it gets filled with light. And now it's filled with light, not just itself. And then I was thinking of the bookends. You know, we have the Israelites leaving, and, you know, they'd rather be slaves and fed than hungry and at liberty. And of course, this was a long, long time ago, and humanity had not evolved to the point we are now. And so that's one level of faith, which is very different than what Van Gogh had. He was at the other end. He wanted to give everything. Now, I go back to that picture of nature. When are we most illumined? Because light is a sign of wealth. It's a sign of everything. I mean, you can't have anything without light, including without the sun, even planets. It's not when it's low. It's not when it's low in the west or in the east. It's when it's straight ahead, straight up at noontime. That is the condition of moderation. Not too much, not too little. If we have too little, we can't be generous. It's an attribute of God. If we have too little, we're needy. We have to depend on someone else. Independence is an attribute of God. If we have too much, there's the danger of, exalting ourselves. In the middle, you have enough to be comfortable. Help your brother, your sister, help humanity, and not have the dire tests that come from one end or the other. So I was thinking these bookends, and again, I have a very simple mind. I see nature in everything, and, you know, that's how I began my spiritual path. And I belong in a writing group, and I use so much imagery of nature in what I write, and they just kind of look at me, you know. But it's a wonderful group. We love each other. But if materialism seeps into us and we cannot any longer see with clarity, what happens? We have clouds, we have fog. We can be looking right at the sun and never know it. And it goes back to some of the concepts you shared. We have to get ourself out of the way. And what is that prison of self? It's when the flower doesn't turn to the sun, whether you're Christian, Jew, Buddhist, whatever it is. For me, it's turning to your Creator with humility
So
and recognizing everyone is a learner, and God forbid we exalt ourselves, but let's keep learning.
beautiful. So one thing you really brought to the fore in my mind, Robert, is the notion that one of the most disastrous things human beings ever do is to imagine themselves as somehow distinct from nature. And so to the extent that we imagine nature as just a resource to be used, rather than it is part of who we are and thus needs to be cultivated and maintained and cared for, and to the extent that we're caring for nature, we're caring for ourselves. So that's profound. The other, I just want to make sure anyone who hasn't read any of the poetry of Mary Oliver, I really recommend Mary Oliver's poetry as a way of seeing spirituality through one's infusion in nature. And so that's very beautiful. Thank you, Robert. Let me invite Norm. Please go ahead, Norm.
I'm so impressed with all the comments today, and I would comment back to Mark about decisions are made, and you have to abide by the decisions. Having embarked on the Sea of Talmud, it's also true that any good Talmud student worth their salt can argue and prove that up is down and down is up. So decisions are decisions, but you can always work with them. Today's Parsha is just so alive, and it really does. I think the fitting with Van Gogh's self-portrait is very interesting. Van Gogh was in the middle of just an explosion of artistic artistry, and it was about impressions. They call the Impressionists. It's about bringing out emotions. It was about seeing things in a different way. And our Parsha is all about emotions and experience and giving people a different impression about things, centering around God. The focus theologically is not that there's only one God; it's that God is greater, and this is hit upon again and again and again. I look upon so much here as a setup. I think many Torah studies are setups. I think the forbidden fruit in the Garden of Eden was a setup, putting the forbidden fruit right under people's noses and then telling them not to eat it. I think the Akedah was a setup also. Setups aren't bad. What's different here, the question is what we can learn from them. And what's different here is that throughout the Parsha, and also last week, in the last couple of weeks, God is saying again and again that he's setting this up. I'm going to do these things, and the Egyptians are going to resist, and I'm going to make them resist. I'm going to make Pharaoh resist. I'm going to harden his heart, and the setup goes on and on and on. One time after the other. This is a period of great growth for the people. The Israelite nation was born in Egypt. And it seems to me that children left Egypt, but adolescents came out of the crossing of the sea. And for 10 weeks or so, the adolescents are going to be there being adolescents, but there's no rules. Strikes me that's an interesting part of adolescence, to be there with all your questions and answers that without rules. I love it when they say to Moses, "Why did you bring us out of Egypt to die in the wilderness?" Which seems to me to be the pillar of all subsequent Jewish humor. That just grinding sarcasm, as Moses is standing there with his face in his hands, shaking his head, saying, "I did not ask for this job. I did not ask for this job." I think there's some precedents that are set here. There's a number of them. Some that, just a couple that come to mind, is that the people get to complain. You get to be, you get to seek after a better life and insist on it and complain about it. And the leaders have to be responsive to that, difficult as it is for Moses. But they have to be responsible and they have to be receptive. And Moses certainly struggles with this. Another precedent that I really like is that women get to rejoice. Women are not second citizens. They don't have to be quiet, shut up in a room and not have a voice. They get to rejoice. They get to sing, dance. They get to be joyful. They get to express themselves, and we get to hear about that, and we get to celebrate it also.
No, Norma, so much of what you said is profound, rich, and shows a great deal of immersion in this rich heritage. And I want to acknowledge that and express appreciation to everyone for being willing to stay on a little bit longer, for being part of this very profound conversation, and try and cohere it back together by remarking on something, an aspect of the portion that we didn't touch on at all, which is how it ends. So how it ends, if you remember, is this battle with Amalek and this curious notion that it says that God is going to be at war with Amalek throughout the ages, forever. And so here's the context, which is, this is the portion in which the Israelites have finally escaped from Egypt, from the grip of Pharaoh, crossed over, left it behind. And what do they encounter at the end of this portion? Amalek.
Another enemy.
So here's what struck me this time as we're reading it, just tonight, is that yes, they escaped from Pharaoh only to encounter an even more fearsome and eternal foe, that of Amalek.
Yeah.
Why? Because Amalek is not a sovereign like Pharaoh, not the ruler of an empire, not the head of an army. Amalek is an eternal enemy. And what does that eternal enemy represent? Amalek is the unleashing of that irrational, ferocious, rapacious energy that is not only out there in the world, but exists within each one of us. And that's why God is going to constantly be a source of being at war with that. And that's part of who we are as well, since we are the inheritor of the divine within us. We are constantly going to be engaged with those urges within us. And notice how structurally in the story, Amalek makes its presence felt. Immediately before it says Amalek came and fought with Israel, you have the people of Israel saying, is God present among us or not? As soon as that sense of distance from the eternal, as soon as there is that lack of sense of intimacy with the divine, that creates the opening for the introduction of barbarity into the world. And so once again, Torah, I think, is trying to give us, through a storyline, through a narrative, these spiritual messages about the extent to which we distance ourselves from the divine, which we carry within us. That merely opens the gates for the barbarity that we also carry within us to come out into the world. And it's a constant struggle to overcome the barbarity, to overcome the lines of power and authority in order to create the circle dance that Miriam and the women demonstrated for us at the sea. I'm so grateful to be part of this rich and wonderful community that helps me in my own personal struggles to overcome the barbarity within me, and to hopefully, even if momentarily, to allow that which is more gracious and divine to become expressed. God bless you all. I look forward to our next gathering. Thank you, everyone, so very much. Be well, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
A wonderful study. Thank you.
Thank you.